He's a fanatic anti-American, a mastermind, and in the words of the State Department, one of the most significant sponsors of Islamic extremist activities in the world today.
Difficulty of refueling the planes over territory where the U.S. lacked permission to be operating.
We're in a different ball game today. This is we're going against a terrorist organization, and that calls for some different techniques.
The primary target in Afghanistan was what one intelligence official called Terrorist University, a vast training complex run and paid for by Osama Bin Laden. There were 6 targets in all, 4 actual training camps, plus a headquarters and large storage area for ammunition, tanks, and guns. In Sudan's capital of Khartoum, the target was a pharmaceutical plant in which American officials believe bin Laden had a financial interest.
We do know that he had contributed to this particular facility. We do know that he has had an interest in acquiring chemical weapons. We do know that this facility produces the precursors that can result in the production of VX.
VX is a deadly nerve gas. Tonight, Sudanese officials denied the accusation, saying the plant only makes drugs, not bombs.
It is a medical factory. It is a private factory. All the people know it.
On Sudanese TV, it was horrifying news.
Of the worst crime against humanity committed a couple of hours ago by the USA fighters.
Was bin Laden himself a target of the U.S. attack?
We were not going directly after Osama bin Laden. It was an attack on his network of terrorist groups, as I think you can see from the targets.
And tonight, Forrest, intelligence sources say that bin Laden appears to have escaped injury and that he is alive and well, ready to continue his holy war against the United States. Forrest?
John, when the dust clears, the U.S. is going to have to deal with an obvious fact. These were attacks on 2 separate sovereign nations. How much consideration have U.S. officials given to that?
The U.S. considered that, apparently, Forrest, and they decided that the other evidence was so important, so overwhelming, they had to ignore that consideration and simply do the strikes.
John McQuarrie, thanks very much, John. Well, Defense Secretary William Cohen said that planning for the strikes had been going on nearly round the clock since last Wednesday, but it remained one of the most closely held secrets Washington has seen in years. At the White House, ABC's John Cochran. John?
Forrest, news of the attacks was so closely held that many here at the White House were surprised. Until minutes before the president appeared, it had seemed another quiet summer's day on Martha's Vineyard. That quickly changed.
The United States launched an attack this morning on one of the most active terrorist bases in the world.
Later at the White House, the president defended his decision, saying he not only had convincing evidence that Osama bin Laden's followers were responsible for the bombings in Africa, but that more terrorist attacks were being planned against Americans.
We have reason to believe that a gathering of key terrorist leaders was to take place there today, thus underscoring the urgency of our actions.
As the president was returning to Washington for national security briefing, some of his aides worried that critics would suspect he had created an international crisis to divert attention from the Monica Lewinsky scandal. It was uncomfortably similar to a recent movie, Wag the Dog, which portrayed a scandal-plagued president starting a war to regain his popularity.
We want you to produce. You want me to produce your war?
Defense Secretary Cohen said, "This is not a movie."
The only motivation driving this action today was our absolute obligation to protect the American people from terrorist activities. That is the sole motivation.
Late today, the president's national security advisor, Sandy Berger, said the United States faced an imminent threat.
We had very specific information about very specific threats with respect to very specific targets.
And that is the legal defense for today's air strikes. Because, as one administration official said, when Americans are in danger, we have the right of self-defense. The official also said, you know, when somebody's coming at you with a loaded gun, you've got the right to shoot back.
At the White House, John Cochran. Thanks very much, John. As to that suspicion that the president was trying to divert attention from his current troubles by ordering the attack, only a few members of Congress raised that argument. Typically, when the U.S. launches any sort of military action or in time of crisis overseas, it is customary to rally around the commander-in-chief. Joining us from Washington, ABC's Cokie Roberts. But as you listen to John's report, Cokie, you can see that the White House was bending over backwards to explain why it's necessary to attack today.
Certainly, because that suspicion was out there, that suspicion of diversion. But the president had been briefing the leaders of Congress. Speaker Gingrich had been, as he put it, in the loop for the last couple of weeks hearing about this, so they were not surprised, and they were, as usual, very supportive of the president, as were most members of Congress who have been frantically issuing statements from all over the place all day today saying they support this action. But a few have, as you say, raised questions about that timing.
And those questions, I think, go to what the president is suffering through, not only here at home, but around the world.
Well, as several people have said, they use the same words. There's a cloud over the presidency. His credibility is so seriously damaged that it is very difficult to believe anything that he does or says, and that can be a problem for world leaders as well as domestic leaders. Those are mainly the president's opponents, critics, who have been saying that. One member of Congress who served in the Persian Gulf War, Jim Gibbons of Nevada, a Republican, did even compare it to the movie Wag the Dog. So it's a problem for the president. Anything he does right now is suspect.
Okay, Roberts, thank you. Let us bring in now George